Only the second time I've used one of these, and it works. So before I get started, I just thought I'd show you. I'm wearing my yarmulke or my kippah, and it's a traditional thing. It's not in the Bible, but it's a sign of respect. And I thought I'd bring this. I didn't know whether I was going to wear it or not, but I thought I would wear it. It's a prayer shawl, and in the New Testament, depending on the version you have, a lot of times these things are called tassels or fringes. And you might remember one passage or passages that talks about the woman who had an issue and she touched the fringe of Jesus' garment and she was cured of it. Well, this is what she was touching. And these things are biblical. In the Old Testament, God commands the Jewish people to wear what are called tzitzit. There are 4 of them on the corners. There are 4 corners, 1 on each corner. And they total the 630. Uh-oh. I'm in trouble now. Someone's probably going to have to come up here and put this on me again because maybe that'll work. Maybe that's it. At any rate, 613 mitzvot or instructions that are in the first 5 books of Moses are represented by 613 knots that are on the 4 corners of this garment. And it's there to remind us of God's Word and what He tells us to do, and that He is giving us these instructions because He loves us, and He only wants the best for us, and He's teaching us what we need to know to get the best out of the gift that He's given us, the gift of life. So I just thought I'd bring that little extra bonus. Okay? To start, though, I'd like to just offer up prayer for a minute. Father God, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here and share this wonderful group of people. Thank you for being here this morning. And may the words that you give me to say today be a blessing to those who are here. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so let me just tell you. My folks are Jewish. I was raised in what would be called a secular Jewish home. My dad would go to the synagogue just like Christians go to church on Easter and Christmas. My dad would go to church on Rosh Hashanah, which is New Year, and Yom Kippur, which is 10 days later, which is the Day of Atonement. And that was enough for him. So I went to Hebrew school up until the time I was bar mitzvahed, or up until the time I became a bar mitzvah is the proper way to say that. Bar mitzvah means the son of the covenant. And when you're 13, your parents rejoice because they're no longer responsible for you spiritually. So they have a ceremony and they spend a lot of money. It's almost like a wedding in terms of the expense that a lot of Jewish parents go to. And you study for that. I studied for it for a year. And when I was a bar mitzvah, there were so many of us in the community that I lived that every week they had 4 of us that were going through this ceremony till they came to me. I had the unfortunate experience of having to have my ceremony the same day as the president's son, the son of the president of the synagogue. So they couldn't have 4 people. They only had to have 2. And so since they had 2, I had twice as much I had to learn, which was not a lot of fun. But I will tell you, I learned it, and 62 years later, I still remember most of it. But once I was bar mitzvahed, I figured, like a lot of people, well, I know it now. I got it. Okay, I don't need to go any further. Thank you very much. I did the same thing in college. I think a lot of people do that. They reach a point and they say, okay, I got enough knowledge here. I don't need to learn anymore. So they stop learning. And the next time I was in a synagogue was for an art auction. Happened to be in Sioux City. So that's by way of background. I'll also have some other things to tell you as we go along. And at the end of this, Reed's going to raise his hand and he's going to tell me to shut up. And if I shut up before he raises his hand, then maybe we'll have some questions and I'll be happy to answer anything. So let's see. So I get married. And I marry this wonderful woman who, in her devotion to the Messiah, gets me acquainted with who he is, makes me curious. And so, although in the beginning I would drop her off and pick her up from church, sometimes I'd go with her, especially if we had a fight. If you have a fight with your spouse, the best thing you can do is go to church with them. Let me tell you. At any rate, when we got married, she was a practicing Catholic, and I was a practicing agnostic. And we agreed to raise the kids Catholic, and that was okay. I didn't really care very much. And but I started to learn about this guy Jesus, and I really couldn't talk to anybody about him because I felt vulnerable. If I was going to talk to someone who was a Christian, I felt, well, I was going to be a notch on somebody's gun, and I wasn't interested in being vulnerable to someone who was going to take advantage of my vulnerability. So I didn't say anything to anyone that I thought might be able to really tell me something. And of course, I couldn't say anything to my Jewish friends because that was like a betrayal to them. Because if you're Jewish, believing in Yeshua, this is the Jewish name for Jesus, then you're worshiping another god. So it's like, you don't do that. In the Old Testament, God is a very jealous God, and any other god is definitely out of the question, and that's the way a Jewish person has looked at it, except for us Messianic Jews. So I used to watch a lot of Robert Schuller, Crystal Cathedral, and whoever else happened to be on Sunday. And that went on for a number of years. But, I forgot to mention one thing. In the 70s, I was in California. Okay, I had somehow run into people in Northern California. I was in the music business at the time. I was putting on music shows in San Francisco in the late 70s. Was a lot of flower power, Jesus freaks running around, and I must have run into some of those people because I kept getting this newsletter from a group called Jews for Jesus. And it was good. It was very interesting. It was especially interesting when I got married because I said, well, here's some middle ground where we can maybe, do something together as a couple. By the way, I'm married 42 years now. Yeah. Those of you who have been married for any length of time, you are good witnesses. Keep it up. Okay. So anyway, I kept getting this magazine, and then wound up moving. Let me see. I got married in '75. Lived in, met my wife in Sioux City. Got married. By the time we had, let's see, 2 kids. We have 3 now. By the time we had 2, we were living back in Northern California. I was in the insurance business. And I kept getting this magazine. It kept following me. And I didn't really know too many people when I moved back to California. And I get this call from a guy, and he says, hi, my name's Stuart Dowerman, and I'm from Jews for Jesus. We keep sending you this magazine, and we just want to know, should we save the trees and not send it to you anymore, or do you want us to keep sending it to you? And I said, you can keep sending it to me, it's fine. And then he says, would you like to get together for a cup of coffee? And I said, sure, why not? I didn't really know anybody in town and so on. And so Stuart and I became friends. Stuart was a member of the Jews for Jesus organization. He was one of the leading members of a group called the Liberated Wailing Wall, which was their musical group. They played in this area when they were still around. He's written many songs that are part of the Messianic Jewish liturgy. And then I was doing my insurance thing, and he'd meet with me every once in a while, and he'd say, well, we just made this new record. Would you listen to it? What do you think of it? So I'd listen to it, and it sounded pretty good. Give me another little understanding about the Jewishness of Yeshua. And it was interesting. Good, Stuart. Good, very good. And one day while all this was going on, my business went down the tubes, which was a wake-up call and made me realize that I was not in control of my life. Someone else was. And I thought, maybe it's God. Didn't know, but I thought, maybe I should read the book. Maybe I find out something. So I started reading the book. And Stuart by then had become enough of a friend so that I felt I could talk to him about the book and what's in the book and about Jesus. And so we started talking and reading. He'd come over the house once a week, and my wife would make supper for him or just coffee, depending on when he'd come over. And we talked about the Roman road, and we talked about other stuff, and it sounded good. It was good. Oh, it was very good. And finally one day he says, I'm kind of an intellectual guy. He says, I do most of my expression, is mental. He says, I need to introduce you to someone who speaks from the heart. So he introduces me to another Messianic Jewish guy who also, like me, like Stuart, was born and raised in New York. And so we get together, and he introduces me to Paul, and Paul says to me, let's see. First he says to me, well, if you don't believe in Jesus, and then you find out later on that he is real, as opposed to believing in him and finding out that he's not real, which you think would be better? And I said, well, that's interesting. I might go that way, cover my bets. So time goes on, and I'm doing my insurance thing, and I'm recruiting people for my insurance thing. And one day, Paul, who is an out-of-work art teacher, calls me on the phone. He says, I'd like to interview with you for that insurance position. I said, oh, great. Okay. So he comes out to my office, and we sit down, and I give him my pitch about how wonderful the opportunity is. And he sits there and listens. And at the end, he says, I don't think this is for me, but would you like to step outside, take a walk with me, and talk about God? Well, I didn't have another appointment. Like Paul, we were having these interesting discussions. I said, okay. So we go outside, take a walk around the block, get back to the office. He says, how'd you like to get in my car and maybe say a prayer and let Jesus into your life? I said, man, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. Why not? So we get into his car, say a little prayer, come out of the car, walk into the office. I don't know, it feels different. It feels a little bit different. Like these things that had been bothering me, not a lot of things, but some things had been bothering me, things that I didn't like about myself, things that I was uncomfortable about that I probably shouldn't have done. It's like I still had done them, but now I didn't feel so bad about them. I felt that, well, maybe I made a good deal here. So the next thing that happened was Paul must have told a bunch of people, and I got a couple calls from people that were all excited. They'd been praying for me. And then somebody invites me to a service. And it's at the Messianic congregation in San Francisco, which was started by Jews for Jesus, primarily for its own staff. And so that's where I really understood that it was okay to be Jewish and believe in Jesus. And of course, then I started to learn about the Jewishness of Jesus, and I became a volunteer for Jews for Jesus. And that was in the late 80s, actually. I think it was 88 or 89. Reed knows better than I do. He mentioned it. And every year, Jews for Jesus has what they call an ingathering. And people of like mind get together for 4 days, hang out, pray, worship together, have various seminars, and generally a wonderful period of fellowship. And I'm also, at that same time, I am doing my exercise thing. Every morning I go out and I go for a walk. And before this happened, 1 week before this, actually no, it's about 3-4 weeks before this ingathering occurs. Stuart and I are walking somewhere, and he says, "You ever think about baptism?" I said, baptism. He said, "No, I don't think so." He said, "Well, baptism is a very Jewish thing." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah." He says, John the Baptist, or John the Immerser, was immersing people in the Jordan River, and what he was doing was performing what in Hebrew is called a tevilah, and today Orthodox Jewish people have what's called a mikvah, which is a ritual bath, and the temple in Jerusalem had a mikvah, and people used to go, before they went to the temple, they went into this pool that was a declining step affair, and then they'd walk in, and then they'd walk out, and so they were ritually immersed, and so that's what a baptism is. I said, "Oh, well, I guess it's okay." And when do you want to do that? He said, "Well, we could schedule that in about 3 weeks or so." I said, "Oh, okay, all right, yeah, why not?" Because I said to myself, if you're going to do this, it's kind of like when you get engaged. You don't kind of hide that. You tell people, right? So I said, okay. If I've already made this commitment, then why wouldn't I want to tell other people? Well, I will tell you that there is a cost to telling people. There are people I told here in Sioux City that were friends of mine that are no longer friends of mine because of that. So there is and I'm a lucky one, because there are some Jewish people who come to faith in Yeshua who wind up having their families hold a funeral service for him. So anyway, that wasn't me. Now we're back at this ingathering. And this ingathering, being I was on the West Coast at the time, and there's one in the East, there's one in the Midwest, there's one in California on the West Coast, and it was being held at this retreat called the Mount Hermon Retreat. Mount Hermon is not really a mountain, it's a large hill. But on top of this hill is this huge cross. It stands about 12 feet high and it's about 9 feet across. And you can see it from anywhere in the general area. And as I was saying that I did a lot of walking, and usually when we were there at this retreat, somebody would go with me in the morning and we'd talk about stuff we'd learned the day before. But the last morning we were there, nobody wanted to go with me. I was all by myself. And I happened to have a map. I was trying to figure out where to go. And you had the map because the retreat had public and private buildings, and you didn't want to walk into somebody's house. So you carried this map around with you so you know where to go. So I look on the map to try to figure out where I want to go, and I see this little sign that says, "This way to the cross." And it has a couple of dots. It doesn't have a trail, it just has a couple of dots. Well, it's pretty obvious. This cross is on the top of this hill, okay? It's easy to get there. You just go up the hill. I mean, I don't care where you start from if you're at the bottom of the hill. If you go up the hill, that's where you're going to wind up. So I figure, okay, well, then that's where I'll go. I'll go walk up to the cross and touch the cross, come back, turn around. That'll be my exercise for the day. So I start walking, and there's a trail, and I start walking up this trail, and I'm seeing me and a whole bunch of other people walking up to the cross, and there are these other trails that are coming, that are merging into this trail, and I see all of these different people, different points of view, and different perspectives, and different experiences, but all coming together in their search for and climb towards this cross. Very meaningful to me. At any rate, it's also very perspiring to me because I'm walking up this hill, and that's what you do when you exert yourself, and that's the whole point of exercise, right? So I'm walking up this hill, and in November, which is when this occurred, in the mountains, the Santa Cruz Mountains, it gets very foggy in the morning. And so I'm walking up the hill. I've got this mist in my hair. I finally get to the top of the hill, and I see maybe another 50 feet away in the glade, I see the cross, and I'm almost there, and I can turn around and come down. Coming down is easier than going up, so I'm looking forward to that. I walk to the cross, I touch the cross, and all of a sudden I see Jesus on the cross. Now, if anybody else had been with me, I have no idea what they would have seen. It didn't really matter. But he was up there, and he was looking down at me, and he had this wreath on his head of thorns, and they were causing him to bleed. And he looked down on me in pain and love, and that's when I knew he died for me. I told this story to someone, and they said to me, it's like he was looking at you through time. And I believe that that's true, because I believe that our Father in heaven, to encourage his Son to go through what he required him to go through, encouraged him by helping him to see what the future was going to be like from what he did for everybody. But at any rate, at that point, I broke down and I cried, I kneeled, I thanked him for what he did. And with the perspiration and the dew in my hair and the tears in my eyes, I I said, this is really your baptism. Father, thank you. So then I got up, I looked up, he was not there anymore. I turned around, I came back down. And the next week, of course, we had the official ceremony, and everybody was happy to see me, and I was the fruit of their prayers, and it was great. And for me, it was like a walk in the park because I had already been baptized the week before. So, at any rate, that's a nice way to get started. And it's always been a great source of strength for me and a great blessing for me to be able to share that with people. And as a result of this whole thing, I felt very much indebted to Jews for Jesus. So I became a volunteer for Jews for Jesus. In my volunteer work for Jews for Jesus, I was the gopher for the missionaries that would come to town. I'd help them unload their boxes of materials. I'd sit there at the materials table at the end of the talk that they were giving and help them sell their books or whatever they were doing. I would put them up at my house if they needed a place to stay. I would show them around town, whatever I could do to help. And one day I was volunteering at a Christ in the Passover presentation. If you haven't seen one, you ought to. That explains how the Exodus experience, is a picture of Jesus' sacrifice. And at the end, the missionary does his talk, and he introduces me as being the local guy from Jews for Jesus. And I went to training with Jews for Jesus. Very interesting. And they said to me something that I'll never forget. If you ever go for any kind of training, you might get the same kind of training. And the person said to all of us that were in this training session, if you're ever asked a theological question, here's the one answer for every single question you get asked. And the answer is, I'm just a volunteer. It's a good answer for somebody who really was pretty new and didn't really know anything to speak of. But I was introduced as the local guy. And at the end of the session, someone comes up to me and he says, how would you like to start an outreach to the Jewish people? Well, I didn't know it until later, but this was the chairman of the board of elders of the Morningside Church of Christ. And he kind of got me because all those years that I was kind of, looking at Robert Schuller and his colleagues, if I had had somebody who was Jewish, who knew Yeshua, it would have been a lot easier for me. I mean, I could have been maybe a lot further down the road. I would have had someone to talk to. And so how could I now say no to this guy who was giving me an opportunity to do that? Reed. Are you there, Reed? You better give me, that's all I have is 5 minutes? Oh, I got to make this quick. Okay. So let me see, where am I at? Okay, so anyway, I say, okay, that's in 2001. We start this fellowship in 2001. We have somebody in the group that wants to be the pastor. I say, great, because not me. I'm not worthy. I know that. Not me. At any rate, he becomes the pastor. He stays for about 4 or 5 years. Then he leaves. Seems that he didn't take his medication one day, and that was the end of that because he was bipolar and nobody knew until that time. Sad story. The group broke up. What was left, we met in my house. Finally, that group got so big that my own family said, we can't go to the bathroom when your group is here because there's always somebody in there. So we started looking for a place, and up until that time, we were at Morningside Church of Christ until we had this breakup. And when I came to Sioux City, the one thing I missed about California was my Messianic congregation. There was nothing here like that. And so I became a member of Glendale Baptist Church, which I still am a member of. And so one day, about 5-6 years ago, I went to them and I said, we'd like to know if we could meet, and would we be able to meet with you folks on Friday night, unless you're using the place? And they said no, and they've been wonderful. They've never charged us a thing. We tithe to them, but it's nothing compared to the value that they give us and the support that they give us. It's really wonderful. You come into that church, you'll see the American flag and the flag of Israel right next to it. So let me see now. Where am I going with this? Oh yeah. So finally, he leaves, and I say, we got to find someone to do this. We got to find somebody to do this. Somebody's got to do this. And finally, I said to myself, if I don't do it, how can I expect anybody else to do this? And so I said, okay, I will do this. I will take on this responsibility. And meanwhile, I've been getting this magazine. It's called Petah Tikva, which in Hebrew means the door of hope. And it's a Messianic magazine written by a Messianic rabbi in Rochester, New York. And I'm reading the book the next day, the magazine, and in the letters to the editor is a letter from somebody that says, I've just taken on the responsibility for leadership of a Messianic congregation. How do I equip myself? Really? To try to make this a shorter story, the editor lists 5 places to go. I contact all of them. Only one of them calls me back. He's a guy from Brazil. And he's been my rabbi ever since, and we expect that he's going to come to the United States. We hope this year to head up a ministry that was created by the Assemblies of God, a national denomination, to teach Messianic Judaism to AG pastors. And just to bring you up to date, I became ordained as a Messianic rabbi and pastor in 2010, Reed? I think it was 2010. Thank you. And I'm also now the international counselor for Petah Tikva International Yeshiva, which is a Jewish university. And I'm a vice president of the Metro Jewish Resources, which is the ministry that was set up by the Assemblies of God. And the last thing I'll tell you, because we're getting close to the end, is from the time I started to work after I got out of college, I envied the guy who was born knowing that he wanted to be a brain surgeon, grows up, goes to college, becomes a brain surgeon, and lives happily ever after. I never knew what I wanted to be. But through everything I was doing, when I came to become the Messianic rabbi of this fellowship called Siouxland International Messianic Fellowship, I knew that God had been preparing me my whole life to do this. So I guess if we have another minute or two, anybody has any questions, they can ask them. But I'm glad to be here. I appreciate very much the opportunity to share this with you. I hope it's been a blessing to you, and I hope you come and visit us on Friday night because I'm there usually. I'll have more to say if you want to come. Yes? We meet in Glendale Baptist Church, which is at 1600 Glendale Boulevard. Friday at 7 o'clock. Anyone else? Anything else? Well, it's a good question. A real good question. My folks came to visit us one day, and my dad says, "Are you trying to convert us?" Because when I first told them, my folks said, "Well, that's fine, just don't try to convert us." And Jewish people have a lot of history that says, if you're a Christian, you're going to try to convert me, you're going to try to make me eat pork. You're going to try to make me worship on Sunday. You're going to try to make me not be Jewish and be Christian instead. And there's a lot of reason why people would say that, and it's almost part of the Jewish culture. I could spend an hour on why Jewish people feel that way, and legitimately so, but that's not the point. The point is that we weren't trying to convert my folks at all. It just so happens we have a lot of literature around the house that happens to have Jesus' name on it, But it prompted a conversation, which was very interesting, because one of the things my dad did say to me was, if Jesus is the Messiah and he's supposed to bring peace, he came. What happened to peace? So it just gives you more of an insight into Jewish thinking. That was kind of the way it was with my folks. When I called my best friend from California because I was excited about it and wanted to share it with him, he wasn't too excited about it. I lost my best friend at that time. But that was 1980, 89, 88. And I have to say now that just about every week I meet with Frank Barron, who's the spiritual leader of the Orthodox community. I meet periodically with Rabbi Green as well. And my goal with these men is to explain to them that Messianic Judaism is not some foreign religion. It is Judaism that is completed. And the more I visit with Frank Barron, the more he understands and appreciates. We have a real good relationship. He's a real good man. Yes, sir. Do I believe the Jewish people who don't know Jesus? I don't know. That's between them and God. Okay? But I do know this, that if it wasn't for Yeshua, then I wouldn't know not only him, but I wouldn't know the Father. My folks were agnostic, but my folks were wonderful parents. And because I was blessed with wonderful parents, especially in this case my father, I had a better idea of who our Father in heaven is. And when Jesus said that we don't come to the Father except through him, I get that because that's how I came to know the Father, through the example that his Son gave us. Does that help? Okay. Thank you very much for letting me come this morning.